You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hello, chum. Did they say chum? Hello, chum, and welcome to ye old Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast, where we rank every story from A to Z, governor.
And I'm Adam.
I'm the bad boy of X-Men podcasting, Zach.
That was quite the attempt at a British accent there, Zach.
It wasn't
Nicely
a good
done.
one.
No,
It was a bad one, actually.
I would have
As
jumped in. I just hadn't practiced, so I wasn't ready.
It's okay. I think my children have made me watch too much Bluey.
Oh. So
Which I'm going to be clear. Yeah. So folks, I'm going to throw this out here. When people say, "Oh, Bluey's such a great show," they explicitly mean that, like, of all the things you can put on for your children, this one is like you're going to get a couple of laughs out of it. This is still a show for children. So maybe like cool it with the adult fans of Bluey stuff. It's throwing me off.
I turned on AEW last week for a couple minutes, and someone was in the audience was holding up a full, like 6 foot tall Bluey cutout in the audience, and I was like, "This is great," but has this gone too far?
That's funny. Hold on, that's funny. That's funny. It's when I'm trying to figure out which episodes of Bluey have been banned in the United States, or at least are not yet out.
Oh, yeah.
And then I find a bunch of adults arguing about this, and I'm like, "Okay, y'all, listen." Maybe
we've taken this too far.
Yeah, and yes, Dad Baby is a great episode, and I think Disney is silly for not releasing it. But
hey, here we are, nonetheless, and Happy New Year to you, Zach.
Oh, happy New Year to you too, old acquaintance. Be forgotten all that.
Well, we are actually going to acquaint ourselves with an old acquaintance, someone that we don't talk about on this show very often. We are starting off 2024 with stories about Captain Britain. Zach, who do we have to thank for this wily request?
Is wily the word you use there? Might be. Who's to say? This wily request brought to us by Sai Beltran. If you want to be like Sai, I've got a great idea for you. What you need to do is go on over to patreon.com/Battle of the Atom. Reach deep down into your hearts, your pocketbooks, toss a couple of coins into our coffers, and then quickly we will be able to get you on this list so we can talk about some things.
Yeah.
Some stuff and some things.
I'm very excited to talk about this first story because it really gave me an excuse to read it after many years of knowing about it and, reading little pieces of it here and there, but I have never actually read the entire thing because it's not the easiest thing to find unless you're going to, basically do an illegal download, because
buy an omnibus. That's
true.
Fully printed in an omnibus.
Yes, you can get it in omnibus form right now. In the omnibus, is it color though? That would be my question because
it is, I believe.
Yeah,
I believe it's recolored for the omnibus, as a lot of these stories are. Like, we're talking about Captain Britain, people. Just because talking around it's going to be a pain.
Talking about Captain Britain.
Like the Alan Davis stuff. The Alan Davis stuff after Alan Moore's run was initially printed in black and white and then reprinted in color when they did the, what's it called? Like, they did a trade of that one. They didn't do the Alan Moore stuff at the time because I believe there were legal questions about what they owned and what they didn't, and Alan Davis was playing ball with Marvel, where Alan Moore was Alan Moore. And I don't say that in a bad way. I just mean that Alan Moore has very strong feelings about what he should own, and I don't blame him.
No. The only reason I asked that is because one of the things I want to talk about is how good this looks in black and white, and how coloring it could probably be to its detriment. So if you haven't caught on so far, the first story we are talking about this week is the Jasper's Warp, which if you were trying to follow along with Marvel UK titles at the time, that might have actually been kind of confusing, because the issues that are being released here are a series of 12 issues in Marvel Superheroes UK from 1981 to 1982, followed by 11 or another 12 issues of the Daredevils in Marvel UK, and then followed by the Mighty World of Marvel 7 to 13. So we have quite the span of titles where this is being doled out in little tiny chapters.
So let me ask, Adam, and we should probably give our readers a update, but how familiar are you with British superhero comic, or not even superhero, but just British comic traditions compared to American ones?
I mean, from my understanding, a lot of it is anthology books. So these things come out with reprints of existing comics, maybe some short stories that are new to that particular edition. You know, Transformers UK was like this, Doctor Who UK, you know, those kind of books that were
2000
coming out.
AD,
Yep.
pretty famously.
Yep.
Yeah. Marvel, because at the time it was a bit of a big pain to do everything across this ocean because the internet wasn't a thing and fax machines were nascent and not really great for like art.
Yep.
They wanted to set up their own publishing branch in the UK that would do comics for the UK market, as well as some reprints. And that worked pretty well, all things considered. And by pretty well, I mean it was a constant failure for them more than anything else. But they did it. And Captain Britain was created to be the flagship character of it. Now, here's the problem about when Captain Britain was created, and we'll get into this in a later thing. But when he was created in the 70s, he was created by Chris Claremont because he was at least born there.
Sure. Yeah. And then,
like,
you know, obviously spent the majority of his life here in the States. But yes, he does claim that I shouldn't say he claimed. He was born there.
I think, yeah, I mean, like,
claims...
I do think the United Kingdom claims him as, yes, he was a citizen there when he was born.
yes. You know, but Chris Claremont, who, you know, does not have a British accent and did move away from Britain.
Who's from New York.
Right. I wouldn't call him British, does sometimes claim to be British, you know, based on the fact that he was born there.
He's British in the same way that guy was mad at me for claiming that I was from Kentucky.
Right. Not raised there, but born there.
I mean, listen, there's some valid points to be made about that. And we would be hypocrites if we did not. However, do you know who is British to their core?
Alan Moore. And Alan Davis is also British, I think.
Alan Davis is very British.
I was going to say, so that makes for two, you know. That's good.
So we say all this preamble about Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, in the classic sense, to say that he was a flop failure character who never really made anything work until in Marvel Superheroes Anthology 377 they restart his character from the ground up. He had previously been in I think he was actually a supporting character in Black Knight UK strip that was running in Hulk.
Wow. Not a good look.
Right before this. You know, I've not read it. I have heard that the Black Knight stuff is actually like the best Captain Britain before we get to this Captain Britain stuff.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, gets moved over to Marvel Superheroes, which is a book that at the time is publishing Avengers, like David Michelinie, John Byrne Avengers, and Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams X-Men. So like they are putting them with the big names.
Sure.
And saying, hey, we're doing Captain Britain. And, you know, we think of this as Alan Moore Captain Britain. But it starts out, and really the first like 10-ish stories in this. And, you know, I say stories, but they're all like 8-page length. I think some get stretched to 12 as it moves into a different book. But they're fairly short issues. But the first ones are actually written by Dave Thorpe, who was another UK writer. And it's interesting because Thorpe really does set the groundwork for all this new Captain Britain stuff. And part of how he sets that groundwork is doing an amazing thing, and that is letting Alan Davis do whatever he wants.
Man, Alan Davis cooks. I was absolutely blown away by his artwork because, typically if X readers have gone back and read his Excalibur run, you're used to Paul Neary inking his stuff. It's a very clean, beautiful style with all of these gorgeous Art Nouveau curves everywhere. And it's not to say that Alan Davis's beautiful line work is not present in these issues. However, this betrays the fact that, as I was talking about before, he is a master of black and white comics. He understands how to really balance the white and the black on a page. He knows all about texture. He knows all about light. And it's just astounding how good these pages look, because he is challenged from beginning to end to do some things that are a little bit more straightforward that wouldn't look that strange in Excalibur, to some really trippy, out there stuff when Jasper starts to warp reality that is pretty amazing. So hats off to a master of comics. It's pretty incredible.
That's a thing. I'm just going to get this out of the way. Regardless of your feelings on Alan Moore, Alan Davis's stuff in this is friggin' phenomenal. Especially for how green and young and fresh Alan Moore is. To have this be some of his earliest professional work, it's jaw-droppingly good.
It really is, and it looks better than, I gotta say, even when he does his, everything he does on Excalibur is pretty superlative, but it's definitely looks better than the stuff he does when he comes back to Uncanny with Claremont. Yes. It is just really stellar stuff. Now, you mentioned Alan Moore. I am on the record many times over that I'm not a big Alan Moore fan. I find his work to be repetitive in a lot of ways, with some similar tropes. And I'm always turned off by the constant presence of violence towards women, especially sexual violence towards women in the female characters that he writes. What's really interesting about this particular story is, number one, it freaking rocks. I have never really liked an Alan Moore story very much before. This is outstanding, but it also serves as a really interesting origin story for almost everything that Moore does in his whole career. There are some of those themes that can be traced back, for good and for bad, to this particular story. This feels like a Watchmen warm up, it does feel like, some of those things that are coming later in his career, that he's trying some stuff out here, and it works.
There's a lot of Miracle Man that comes out of this. There is a lot of Watchmen that comes out of this. So much so that there are, there's high level things like the idea of, superheroes are illegal now, which is actually a Dave Thorpe thing. That's a thread that Alan Moore is picking up on when he takes over the book.
Yeah.
But there is essentially a character being rebuilt from the ground up that is very reminiscent of what he will later do in Anatomy Lesson in Swamp Thing. There is stuff as little as the symbolism of a smiley face getting like ripped up or like distorted in some way that will become the iconic image of Watchmen. There's
a little bit of V for Vendetta in here. Like
there is straight up the Dr. Manhattan issue of Watchmen.
Yes.
Where he lives in all times and all places all at once. That happens in this comic, like in the same way that I had to take a minute and say, Alan, like, I don't think you're stealing from yourself. I think you're taking an idea that you thought was interesting and expanding on it in a more refined way, because I am someone who will go on record and say I generally like Alan Moore's stuff, and while I agree with the criticisms, it does not personally ruin the work for me. I think he's a master of the craft a lot more than a lot of people, and puts a lot of care into the stuff that he does in terms of making it a comic. And I think that comes through in this, especially because this is early Alan Moore stuff. This is before he does any of the stuff that you would consider Alan Moore comics. This is 1980, what? 1? 98, 81,
Yeah,
82?
we're starting in like 1 or 2, 81, 82.
It
So
starts in 81, goes till, I think, 84.
yeah, and just to be clear, like, while I'm not a particular fan of Moore's work and his body of work, I mean, he's a good writer. I want to just be clear about that. It's just, it's never been my taste.
Mhm.
Now, what's going on here, though, I think is benefited by the fact that each of the chapters are a little bit shorter, because as we go through these 2 or 3 years worth of short, little blasts of story, it flies. Once you read it in totality, there's a pace to it that is just incredible. And part of that is that the story, for those of you who have never heard of this before, involves Captain Britain seeing Jim Jaspers, who is a reality warper, essentially come to totalitarian rule in an alternate Earth, and creating this creature known as the Fury. And we've
It
seen the
kills
Fury.
superheroes.
Yes, the Fury kills
It
superheroes,
kills superheroes.
which is important to note, and it's very good at its job. We've seen the Fury come back in the
Kills
Krakoan
superheroes.
era, but if you don't know where it came from, this is it. And that creature, who seems to be destroyed in one Earth, is so intent on killing superheroes after his existence. Well, his entire Earth has been destroyed. Right? It's like
Let's
been
pause right
blinked
here.
out of existence.
I want to make sure people understand the context. Captain Britain gets thrown out of Otherworld, thinks he's in his Britain, actually ends up in fake Britain. It's Earth 238, which is important because this is the comic where Earth 616 comes from and all of the universe designations. Which,
Right.
don't let anyone tell you it was an important thing. It's just them throwing some friggin' numbers around. Alan Moore was most likely, knowing Alan Moore, throwing 616 in there as a number of the beast reference, because 616 is one potential, though not widely accepted translation of the number of the beast from Revelation. So, ha ha ha, very funny. We live in the devil universe. I think that's great too, Alan. All that being said, they get to a world it's a Thatcher Britain, like, taken to its extreme world. That's what it is. Jasper's is a Margaret Thatcher stand-in. He is that kind of British conservative that, Moore was very concerned about when you see it in a lot of his work, especially V for Vendetta. And he takes over. All superheroes are illegal. We find out that the Fury has killed all the superheroes. And we get that in a very interesting way, because like the first 6 or 8 chapters, the Dave Thorpe stuff, excuse me. The Dave Thorpe stuff looks great, has some interesting stuff, like the Crazy Gang is in here.
Yep.
A few other things like first appear, but it's like, okay, what's it doing? Because you get to a point where Captain Britain's sidekick, Jackdaw, gets murdered and then resurrected. By the way, Jackdaw is the worst, and I understand that. He's terrible.
Yeah, the transition from Captain Britain having an elf sidekick bestowed upon him from Merlin and Roma is surely something, but the fact that it is, really a turning point of the story, that he is brutally murdered, tells you what kind of a story you're going to be reading, because we're starting to see the effects of what Jasper is, doing on this plane. Now, Captain Britain has to face, well, it's not him, it's Saturnine, right? That has to face trial.
Yes. So
Yeah.
all this happens. Saturnine comes, tries to fix this world, decides that they can't. That world gets put on trial after all this stuff, and another member of the Captain Britain, not even of the Captain Britain Corps, he runs it. He's Saturnine's number 2. Anyway, he takes over control of everything, and the decision is made by him almost exclusively to eliminate that universe from all reality henceforth.
Yeah, it just blinks out of existence along with everybody that lives in it, and
chooses to kill billions.
Yes. So the only survivor of that world is the Fury, because the Fury kind of wills itself to cross over into Earth 616 after reforming itself.
There is one other survivor.
Oh, right.
And that is Linda McQuillan, the
Yes.
Captain Britain of this Earth.
Yes.
Uh,
Captain UK.
she's- Captain UK. And what you learn about Linda is that when the Fury came to power, she was deeply traumatized by seeing everyone she knew and loved brutally murdered, which makes a lot of sense. By the way, all of the superheroes in this are classic British and almost exclusively British comics characters, which means you can look at them and say, this is a reference to something, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
Which I think is very funny.
Yeah, especially because Moore is going to pull this trick with Watchmen later. The fact that he's doing it here, it's indicative of some of his later work.
In Watchmen, he pulls it with the Charlton characters.
Exactly.
What is really funny to me in this is that he pulls it with Marvel Man, who he will then, 2 years after this, write, but his fake name for Marvel Man is Miracle Man, the name that he will rename Marvel Man to get around copyright stuff.
It's an amazing level of layers there for a cameo that's not very long. It's a very brief thing. You don't really even see the character full figure. So once we've gotten back to the 616, we are now figuring out that there's a Jasper's here too, and history is starting to repeat itself. And the Fury is on the hunt and is looking to kill Captain Britain and his colleagues. So, we...
Hey, who's his colleagues, Adam? You say his colleagues, you just kind of skimmed over. Who's his colleagues?
This is complicated. This is complicated.
Please, Adam, tell me his colleagues.
Yeah, the family of Captain Britain here is starting to grow. We have Mastermind, the master computer that lives in the basement, and is kind of like techno-organically taken over, even though he's the one that killed Captain Britain's father, who also happened to be from...
We're not getting into the Mastermind stuff. Yes.
Anyway, we can get into that a little bit later.
Yes.
We've got Betsy, and who else is here in this part? Because I'm getting our stories overlap because there's so many little Alan Davis creatures all the time.
Yeah. Well, one, there is Strike, who's
right.
a bunch of telepaths. Most importantly, buddy, it's the special executive.
Oh, the special executive. Yeah.
For folks who don't know, the special executive is future versions of TechNet, essentially. We know TechNet better, but it's like Fascination and Numbers and who's the Legion is the guy that jumps around, led by War Dog.
War Dog's great. Love War Dog.
It's TechNet. They are the best, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the great appeals of Captain Britain and early Excalibur is that every once in a while a new team of weirdos shows up, right? You mentioned the Crazy Gang. The special executive shows up, then later it's TechNet.
Alan Davis just wants to draw a bunch of weird dudes.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, Alan Davis says, here's my new freaks.
Yeah.
Here's my freaks of the week. You're going to love them. And you know what? I do. Fascination has an incredible design. Like, it's that high pony.
We're going to talk about some more of them later in this episode who show up in another Captain Britain story we're going to cover. But it is kind of funny how these things happen. And, we do get to this point where Jasper's is starting to sort of, warp reality. It does seem as if everything is going to be happening the same way they did in the other Earth. And it really comes down to Captain UK, Linda McQuillan, who's refusing to fight this entire time, confronting her trauma and essentially ripping the Fury to shreds with a little bit of help from Captain Britain. But essentially it's her that is able to take this monster out finally. So that
it's that last panel of that story when Captain Britain says, because Linda is going to town on the Fury finally after a long fought battle, many deaths, all this stuff, and he says, Linda, you can stop. It's dead. It's been dead for 10 minutes. Like, she has been eviscerating this thing because all of the rage and guilt and pain that she felt when her Earth fell, she is just like having that wash over her, and it's a good friggin' page. Like, that all works really well for me. Everything about the Fury, it kills superheroes, is just about my favorite stuff.
Well,
Like,
this
Jasper's is scary. The Fury is like terrifying.
That's what I was going to say, is that they're like, I have read other Alan Moore work and felt very little. This one, it's scary. Like, it is actually pretty scary, these characters, and the Fury itself is just this unstoppable killing machine. It is really frightening. So hats off. It's done really, really well. Our story does end with us learning that Merlin has died, because there's
I'm never
this,
going to understand Merlin and Roma, and I'm never going to try, and that's fine.
okay. Saturnine has used this occasion to take power of Otherworld, to the point of making her predecessor lick her boot at the end of the story, which is a nice little touch. And I think the only thing that I could complain about in this entire thing is that I didn't quite understand why Linda McQuillan and Brian Braddock kiss on the last page. It just doesn't feel.
I think that was 100% a weird editorial thing.
It
like,
doesn't
like, oh, yeah,
seem.
It feels like a weird note, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you know, sometimes you watch an action movie and the you know, the one female character kisses the male lead and you're like, what was that? You know, like, there was no chemistry between these characters this entire time. So it's odd.
That's what that.
But
it's a weird one-off thing.
That is one panel or two panels maybe, and I'm willing to let it off the hook because this is outstanding, and I would like to rank this quite high because I think this is extremely well done.
That's the thing about the Jasper's Warp, also known as Crooked World.
Yes,
it rules. I think Jim Jaspers is a character that I have seen again, and I am fine if we just don't do more Jim Jaspers stuff, because I feel like it dilutes his character a little bit the more he shows up. But dang, like, Alan Moore does almost, I think he pretty much does nothing for Marvel after this. And I don't blame him.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's great. If you can only do one.
Yeah, if you're going to go one and done, you might as well go out as an all-star, because this rocks. So why don't we try and rank this on our big old list?
That's the thing about our big old list, Adam, is that we have 885 X-Men stories that we've been ranking from best to worst, top to bottom, with the best being House of X Powers of 10, number 200 on the list being Marvel's Epilogue, number 400 on the list being the first Maggot/Trial of Gambit stuff, number 600 on the list is X-Corp 1 through 5, number 800 is Marvel Superhero Special 8 through 6. That's the Roy Thomas X-Men Outback story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the worst X-Men story of all time, 855 on our list, 2099 Word of Tomorrow.
Amazing. So I think at the very least, I'm more than willing to say this is a top 50 story, and I think it might even be a top 25 story, Zach.
Adam, I also think this might be a top 25 story. I think charitably, where I feel like, no, this is a better story, at minimum, this is better than number 22, which is The Passion of Scott Summers, Uncanny X-Men Volume 2, number 19, which is right above the Proteus arc, which is similar enough. But I'm going to say Alan Davis is wiping the floor with John Byrne on weird reality warping stuff.
Absolutely. It is killer when you look at the artwork from this. So I don't think that's a stretch at all. And I just keep creeping up the list here. What do you think about it against something like Dark Angel Saga at 17?
I have gone back since we initially ranked that in like the first couple of months of the podcast.
Uh-huh.
I'm not as hot on Dark Angel Saga as I once was. I think Dark Angel Saga is a little too complex, and I don't think that it's the best part of Uncanny X-Force. So, like, if Re-Rank Narok ever came around, that one would be one that I would want to drop down somewhat.
Okay.
But, like, right above that is Messiah Complex, and I think this is a tighter, better story than Messiah Complex.
Yeah, and above Messiah Complex is Worst X-Man Ever, which, you know, I'm a huge fan of. At 14 is Generation Next. I think if I was going to slot it in somewhere, I would probably put this in between Generation Next and Worst X-Men Ever, because Generation Next, at least for me, still hits that really bottom of my stomach, like desperation thing and I have a lot of nostalgia for that book as well. How high are you looking on the list? My ultimate
My
ceiling, I can't go above Wolverine's Wedding at 11. I don't think that
see
Paul Smith stuff I think is better.
my ceiling is a little lower. My ceiling is Riot at Xavier's from New
Okay.
X-Men.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
at 13. I think Riot is better than this. I'm right there with you. I'm like, do I feel like it's better or worse than Generation Next? I think you would have to ask me on the day. Like I would it
I want to give the edge to Generation Next only because I have stronger affinity for it. I've reread it
yeah.
more times. Chris is one of my favorite artists of all time. I honestly think what we're talking about, this Jasper's Warp story is absolutely outstanding.
I
So I'm kind of torn,
I would
like,
tend to agree, and I think the reason why is Generation Next is 4 tight, consistent issues, where the Jasper's Warp, because it has the Thorpe stuff at the beginning that is still good,
mhm.
but not as good, it holds it back a bit, just a bit,
Okay.
just enough to say, you know what? At this level that we are at, I would put it at our new number 15, right below Generation Next. But I'm telling you, like, if y'all haven't read it, because it's kind of hard to find, and it's a Captain Britain story, and Captain Britain stories are weird. That's cool. Y'all like most of the foundational comics of the 80s and 90s. Well, you probably will like this one also.
Yes, and far be it from me to recommend pirating something, but if you don't have the money for the omnibus, it is fairly easy to find a download of it online. So
Just find a way to read the Jasper's Warp. Warp
I
reality. Make
yes,
this thing happen.
yes,
Because this is not an exaggeration. Like, it's freaking good. You like, this is where we get Betsy Braddock, like, actually being Psylocke, because Chris Claremont, yes, made her telekinetic in his stuff, and then left the book and no one brought it up again. Not
mm-hmm.
telekinetic, made her precognitive or whatever he had. But, like, no one touched that for 15 years.
Yeah,
And then Alan Moore comes in, and Alan Moore, if you find the original issues, and I think it's his first or second issue, he has an essay in the actual physical, just going over the history of Captain Britain and, like, his approach to it, and it's incredibly insightful and worth reading,
okay,
because it tells you, like, he did the work, he read it all, and he says, this is what works, this is what doesn't, and he's 100% right. So he goes in, destroys all the stuff that doesn't work, makes all the things that do work. Also, this is the comic, props to Alan Davis, that gives Captain Britain a good costume, which he had
yes.
previously never had.
Well, let's talk about those things that don't work. Let's talk about that costume, the original version, because our next story is from Captain Britain Volume 1. And we are going to be talking about issues 15 to 27. This is a time that Captain Britain and Captain America team up in London to fight the Red Skull. Who's our creative team here, Zach?
This is a Gary Frederick story. There is some Larry Lieber in this as well. Their actual workloads kind of split on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
With most of the work in terms of art being by Herb Trimpe, but John Buscema jumps in on some of the later issues. Buscema is inked by Tom Palmer and Fred Kita, who Kita does all of the inks for Trimpe.
Yeah, pretty wild style difference when we jump from Herb to Buscema. It's a pretty wild difference, because Herb is doing much more of a Jack Kirby, Joe Simon style, and Buscema is doing a little bit more of a modern, more realistic art style. That said, there's not a lot to this story. Again, these are relatively short chapters because there are 3 different anthology stories in each one of these issues. And what I said before about Red Skull versus Cap Britain and Cap America, I mean, that is pretty much what's going on. Red Skull is interested in taking over the mastermind computer in Captain Britain's basement. But then that plotline kind of just goes away in favor of a ransom plot in which the Red Skull kidnaps the prime minister and threatens to blow up Big Ben. I mean, that's pretty much it.
The Red Skull wants to start the Fourth Reich. Makes sense.
Right.
It's his deal. Captain Britain and Captain America both think that would be a bad thing. This is like the first idea you would have to do a Captain Britain team-up story, right? Like, Captain Britain has to meet another Marvel hero. What does he do? Well, what if we redo World War II?
Sure. Yeah.
Red Guardian should have shown up, honestly.
We are introduced to Chief Inspector Di Thomas, who has a long-standing vendetta against Brian Braddock and Captain Britain, and is, almost unmasks Captain Britain, except thanks to Steve, that doesn't happen. And then there's also a pretty funny subplot involving Nick Fury meeting his British counterpart.
You know his British counterpart, Commander Lance Hunter, don't you?
Yes, Commander Lance Hunter of Strike, who we mentioned before, but this version of Strike is very much just, hey, it's British Shield.
We're British Shield.
Yeah, and Lance Hunter, I mean, God, he looks straight out of like a 70s spy show. It's pretty great.
The thing about Lance Hunter, and I love this, is that he was supposed to get an MCU spinoff at one point, right?
Oh, no, really? Oh, that's terrible.
Lance Hunter was a actually incredibly charming supporting character in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show that I wouldn't recommend people watch.
Wait, was he?
All the way through? Yes, because here's the thing about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show I watched 5 seasons of. The first season spends 16 episodes being pretty bad.
Yep. Watched all of that.
Then Captain America Winter Soldier happens, and S.H.I.E.L.D. has to get blown up, and the show actually gets stakes and is good.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to remember who played Lance Hunter and if I got that far into the series, because
Oh, no, Lance Hunter was played by Nick Blood.
Nick Blood? Oh, yeah. This guy. That was supposed to be Lance, huh? Okay.
I mean, that was his name. It was him and Bobby Morse were members of the team. Mockingbird?
Yeah, I do remember they were going to do a Mockingbird spin-off show, so that's what this was going to be?
It was going to be Marvel's Most Wanted. They filmed a pilot and wrote them out of the show, but then the pilot didn't get picked up, and Adrian Pataki got other gigs.
I do remember when this happened. Yeah, I just never made the connection that was supposed to be the same character.
It's him! That's who Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was pulling.
Weird. But that show had all kinds of weird stuff happening.
That show did have all kinds of weird stuff. I'm just going to say I fell off of that show when they went into space and started doing like Kree stuff. And I was like, I'm probably not watching this last season. I did watch the entire season where they did Ghost Rider and they did Secret Empire, like the Nick Spencer story at the same time the Nick Spencer story was going on. And it was very funny when Nick Spencer was walking around like, well, Hydra's not really Nazis. And then this show was just very explicitly being like, Hydra's Nazis, dude.
Oh, yeah. And
a thing this comic is very into is like, no, this is Red Skull. He does Nazi stuff. We do not deal with that.
No, and I have talked in past episodes about my reluctance to really be happy about characters like flaunting swastikas and stuff like that. But there are a lot of these numbskull Fourth Reichers in this story that are just, basically cannon fodder for our heroes to just punch, and so it's fine, our characters, just drop
what's
them to the ground.
About
it's great.
This story, what I find actually really interesting, one of the few things, Gary Frederick does hey, this is how you would recruit neo-Nazis today. Like, this is how you would find people who are dissatisfied with their country, dissatisfied, needing someone to blame, and finding an outlet for that. Like, he's doing the recruitment speech to a bunch of socially or fiscally conservative people and saying like, oh, but this is the solution to all your problems. And that is interesting. What else I find interesting about this, and Adam, I hope you found this as delightful as I did, is that about halfway through this, Captain America and Captain Britain die.
Oh, right. Yeah. And then is it Strike or Shield that decides they're going to, oh no, it's Shield because it's Dum Dum Dugan. He's going to replace them with life model decoys, the LMDs, but they don't work. And then it turns out they're not.
What I find very funny is they don't show up for like 2 issues of this script after they blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And then they show up and there's a caption that just says, we'll let you know how they got out of that one when we have a break in the action. But obviously we have not had time yet.
And they never explain it.
They do. They explain it in issue 26 of this.
Oh.
On the second to last chapter of this story.
Wow.
They say, actually, this is how Captain Britain helped us escape.
Oh, right. Okay, I did. Yep. But it's
because I was waiting. Because it's like, I was like going through each chapter, like, have they still not explained how these guys died? Are we not there yet? Evan?
I'm gonna be frank with you. This story to me is not extremely engaging. You know, it's a lot of punch, run somewhere else, and you know, there is a little bit of classic comics fun in having everybody hanging off of the hands of the clock of Big Ben. You know, where's the bomb? Red Skull, oh, he's got rockets in his shoes, you know, let's break those so he's not able to, you know, keep flying in midair. But I mean, it's a lot of Silver Agey kind of nonsense that is not, there's no depth to it, you know. It's a punch 'em up.
No depth.
No, so not a lot to talk about here with this one. I will say Buscema's artwork looks utterly fantastic in the latter issues. It really adds an element of, you know, fun to the story that's not really there with Herb Trimpe's.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not the best.
No.
Also, why does Captain Britain have this costume? This is an insane costume.
It's not great. I've never quite understood the design, but it's just
he's got too much going on.
Yeah,
he's got the flag mask. He's got the lion crest. He's got the staff, and he's got the amulet just like hanging out around him.
Yeah, with the chains. I don't know, man. He's got a lot going. It's a lot better in Volume 2 when it's like, wait, are these powers from my suit? Oh, they're me? I just get enhanced by the suit. And like, obviously the suit is a lot better, you know, when Alan Davis does it. So
yeah.
So this is not
Weird
going to rank
comic.
as high as Jasper's Warp. I would actually say this is quite a bit lower.
It's quite a bit lower. It's not the worst thing I've ever read, but it falls in with a lot of the like, it's such a weird 70s comic.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we're probably in the 500s here, you know?
Definitely in the 500s.
Okay, at 604, we have Excalibur 96 to 100, the London Hellfire Club. Better or worse than that?
This is worse than the London Hellfire Club.
Okay, so we're in the 600s.
A comic I don't really like.
Yeah. I mean, there's just unfortunately not a lot going on here. You know, the Fury Lance Hunter rivalry can only take us so far.
I think this is worse than Exiled, the New Mutants Journey into Mystery crossover.
I would agree. All right. How low are we going here?
How does this compare to the time Magneto got turned into a baby?
Oh, this is worse than that. And I think this is worse than IVX at 651.
This is worse than Wildcats X-Men at 655.
Yeah, we just
I've been
keep
thinking
working
about
our way.
Wildcats a lot today.
Man.
No real reason. I'm just thinking about them.
They're a lot of fun sometimes. Not all the time. Worse than Die by the Sword at 681?
No, because I still can't explain Die by the Sword to you.
All right.
I've read it 3 times.
Better or worse than Wolverine Bad Rock at 675?
I've also been thinking about all the original Image books today. Things I don't think I've read more than 3 pages of any of them combined.
Wow. You know, you need to go back and do a Max read. You know, that'll be the most satisfying.
No, because Max isn't a Founder book. That's the thing.
No, that's true. He's second wave, but still, if you never read Wildcats, it's a lot of fun.
Maybe I'll get into
like
Wetworks or Shadowhawk.
Wetworks. Wetworks is also technically not, even though Wilson was a founder, he's still a second wave book because he got delayed.
Yes, because he had the family stuff that
Yeah.
really just... Anyway, sad for Whilce Portacio. I don't care about Wetworks. Yeah, this is worse than Wolverine Badrock.
Okay.
I would say let's put it above Iceman Volume 2, but below Extreme X-Men Intifada.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Or Intifada.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our new 677.
Fantastic. So if we were ambivalent about that one, let's get back to singing the praises of Alan Davis. So we're
Alan Davis, good.
Yeah, Alan Davis is good. So Marvel UK then moves on to Captain Britain Volume 2 after the Jasper's Warp. And we are covering issues, 5 to... What are we doing here?
It's 5 to 9.
9.
Now, here's the thing about these Captain Britain stories, or this entire run of Captain Britain. It's all kind of flowy together.
Yes.
Like, comics end and start in the same chunk. So there's not perfectly clean points anywhere, but this is about the best we could get. Because this is a story that, the previous story is kind of over. And Captain Britain ends up in a new place. Or he's at home. And he gets challenged by Captain Britan, who's a different Captain Britain. He has to fight him, who's his evil...
Here's the backstory about this, is that the issue before number 6 is number 5. It's actually the introduction of TechNet. And TechNet has been hired to kidnap Captain Britain.
We weren't going to not talk about TechNet.
Yeah, unfortunately, they kidnap our Captain Britain and not the Captain Britain that they have been hired to kidnap, who comes from another one of these, like, as is, the trope in Excalibur and Captain Britain, another totalitarian alternate universe that is run by an evil version of Saturnine and this evil version of Britain, Captain Britain. So they don't realize that they've kidnapped the wrong one.
This is Upal, the evil Captain or the evil Saturnine we're talking about in this is Opal Loon Saturnine, the evil one that she's the evil Saturnine that replaces Courtney Ross eventually,
right?
Which is not, but this Captain Britain is not Nazi Captain Britain, who we do meet later in this story.
Yeah, he's still a totalitarian, but he's not the same one you meet in Excalibur. So anyway, the two Captain Britons fight. We think that our Captain Britain has won, when that is not the case. The evil one has switched them out. So TechNet is now taking the good Captain Britain back to this evil Saturnine, while evil Captain Britain starts to mac on Psylocke, which is really icky, and I didn't like it very much.
I didn't like it either. This is Alan Moore and Jamie Delano, by the way. Delano's doing the writing based on some Alan Moore plots.
Alan Davis.
Yes, Alan Davis. I'm sorry, Allens. This is the good drawing Alan, not the good writing Alan.
Right. And, the artwork continues to excel here. It is absolutely fantastic. I love it. I really don't... I know that this was recolored. Well, no, this was probably colored in its second printing, right? Or maybe in its first.
No, I believe its first printing was black and white.
Okay.
Because nothing's credited as a colorist.
Yeah, that's true.
On any of this. But then when it actually gets quickly reprinted as Before Excalibur. Captain Britain Before Excalibur. Which I think I'm seeing it. Yes, is the collection you are holding also the collection that I have over there.
Yeah, and if you can track this down, it's absolutely beautiful. It basically...
It's a nice... They weren't doing trades at the time. Like, that was... No. This comes out in, like, 88, I think?
Yeah, it's a 1988 book, and it's really... but what's unfortunate is when you open it, it gives you a synopsis of the Jasper's Warp and the original Captain Britain Volume 1 run, instead of actually
I love how they're like,
showing you
you
that.
are going to have to know this. I know this is an American book. You can't get it, but, like, Chris read it, so Chris is going to be bringing all of this stuff in. He wanted to do it even more. Can you imagine if Claremont just did all the Jasper's Warp stuff like he planned on doing, and like
would have been
200 instead
absolutely,
of
would have been absolutely insane. So once we get the Captain Britain situation figured out, because they do return the good one, We are again introduced to the mastermind computer who, basically convinces them that he could be kind of a helpful agent, even though it's very clear that he's up to no good. And we are then introduced to the Warpies, who we've talked about
Because
on the show
Alan
before.
Davis wants to give us more freaks. He already gave us TechNet. Gatecrasher is in this. Here's the thing. Gatecrasher might be the biggest Alan Davis freak that's ever existed. And I love her.
Yeah, mother.
She yaps there. What's his name? The baby. The baby's not here.
No, we
Joy Boy. It's Joy Boy.
We're not quite to the full Excalibur TechNet roster yet, but the other group of weirdos that we have. So we've got TechNet, we've got the Warpy children, and we also have the Cherubim, who are the freakiest and the most deadly of the Warpies, who are being used potentially by Strike to do. Oh, not Strike. This is the RCX.
This is the
do
RCX.
Extra evil stuff.
Because Strike mostly died.
Yes.
In the Jasper
so the RCX is, in charge of all of the Warpies and the Cherubim. The Cherubim get loose because of, and this is really where I want to concentrate our energies here, because the other major character that gets introduced in this part of the book is Megan, who we got a glimpse of Megan in the Moore stuff.
And she had been rescuing Megan stuff was the first, or was in one of the earlier parts of the Davis Excalibur.
Yeah,
because she's at this point she's already living at Braddock Manor,
and she is in her original form, which is kind of this bat creature, just monster essentially, and when she gets a chance to kind of break free from that, she becomes the modern looking gorgeous blonde that we are used to when she comes into Excalibur. And we learn, that she does have the ability to transform. What's really fascinating about this is that I don't necessarily think, especially because if you have been listening along with my one and only Anna Papard as they finish off Excalibur on Oh Gosh Golly Wow, Ben Robb, for instance, has absolutely no idea who this character is. And I think you could make an argument that Chris Claremont doesn't necessarily understand this character either, because the version of her that's here is vastly different than who we encounter in Claremont's Excalibur. She's much more of a street tough and, clearly comes from hard beginnings in her original appearances. Whereas by the time we get to Excalibur, she's much more of sort of a muted, devotee to Captain Britain, who, is occasionally a powerhouse, but doesn't necessarily have that sort of like brawler thing that's going on here.
Megan's got a lot going on. She's not the most straightforward character, but I will say the page where I think there's a lot to say about conventional beauty standards and, should Megan have to be this beautiful bombshell kind of lady? I think those are all fair discussion points. Also, Alan Davis draws some really pretty women in like great poses, and not in the like overly sexualized cheesecake way that you get with some guys, like a Terry Dodson, an artist I like, but Davis is a lot more muted. So when she becomes like standard issue Megan, I got to pop out of that one. Like that was good. Like I was like, okay, this looks great, Alan. You got me here.
Oh, it's an incredible reveal. And of course, the way this arc wraps is also a really great sequence that only I think a visual comedian who's really good at the character acting that he does, that Alan Davis can do, because the Warpy children have moved in, and Captain Britain can't go anywhere in his house without running into them, including the bathtub. So
it's good bits.
It's really funny. You don't see these things very often that actually will get a laugh out of me. So I enjoyed this quite a bit. And if you are an Excalibur fan, I highly recommend you track this part of the Delano Davis stuff down. because it's quite good.
Because you want to understand Excalibur at a certain point, and this is nearly required reading. I don't think that Jasper's Warp is required to understand Claremont, Alan Davis, Excalibur. I do kind of think that the JB Delano, Alan Davis stuff is pretty essential.
I would agree. I mean, it really does help you understand who those characters are by the time you get to Sword is Drawn. So I enjoyed this quite a bit. It's definitely better than the Captain Britain Volume 1 stuff, but nowhere near the heights of the Jasper's Warp, but still pretty solid. You know, these are good comics.
These are good solid comics.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see, where do we have some Excalibur on this list, though not as much as one may think.
No, we really haven't covered that much. At 219, we have Excalibur.
Well, okay, but one of us is dating someone who's covering all of it.
That's true. And hopefully people are listening to that show as well, because, you know, it means we don't have to do it.
Hey, maybe listen to it this month, and one of your friends from this podcast will be on it.
I've heard you might be co-hosting. That's good news.
I said one of your friends. It could be you. In fact, it would be more likely to be you, Adam.
I've already been on at least, well, actually, technically, I've been on more than once in the last year. So I don't know if I will be on.
All I'm saying is one of us was only invited after we had a drunken meeting where I was like, man, I really want to talk about Pharaon. Yeah, that good issue
where he jumps out of a cake.
Revenge.
I'm gonna say something crazy. At 131, we have Excalibur Mojo Mayhem. I think this is better than that.
I think you are crazy.
You don't think this is better than Mojo Mayhem?
I do not think this is as tight of a story as Mojo Mayhem.
Okay.
I would almost give you Truth and Consequences, Excalibur 61, which is less of a story and more Alan Davis draws Phoenix punching Galactus.
Yeah, I think this is better than that. I mean, that is a beautiful issue, but I think there's more story going on here than that.
Here's where I would say. I would throw this out there. Above X-Men Second Coming at 134, but below Uncanny X-Men 171, where Rogue joins the team.
That is a great place for this. So that would make this our new 134 Captain Britain. What are we calling this? Double
game.
Double game. I keep wanting to call it Double Trouble, but that's not what it's called.
That's not what it's called at all.
Yeah. So especially for, you know, fans of Alan Davis, fans of Alan Moore, fans of Excalibur, I highly recommend you hunt down the Jasper's Warp and definitely see if you can, you know, get the Captain Britain trade, or just go whole hog and get those omnibuses. I'm sure you can get them digitally, so you don't need to have the whole phone book in your house.
Yeah, find a way to read these things.
Yes.
I want to thank Sai Beltran for requesting this. This is a fun one. I was excited when I got the Jasper's Warp in my inbox saying, hey, y'all should read the Jasper's Warp. I was like, finally! Someone wants me to talk about the Fury. It kills superheroes, Adam.
It's a great start to the year. Can't complain at all.
Oh my gosh. You ever think about that comic that Ailes Cott did with Matt Walsh? Not Matt Walsh. What's his name? Silver Coin. It's Matthew Walsh.
Okay.
I'm an idiot. It is Matthew Walsh. I was right. That great Secret Avengers comic they did where the Fury has babies with an extra dimensional being.
Yeah.
That, I know as I say it, that sounds bad. Actually, that Secret Avengers comic's super good. It just doesn't have any X-Men stuff besides the Fury.
Hey, all kinds of good stuff, right? I'm sorry.
It's got Fred Moore on covers.
I just got distracted by realizing what it is we're doing next week. I'm sorry. I forgot.
So y'all know how it's the fall of X right now?
Yes.
Well, as it says in Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about Matthew Rosenberg's Uncanny X-Men next week, and I think it's going to be an interesting time. I have not revisited these comics in a few years.
Me neither. Very excited to revisit.
Adam, what do you got going on? Because I have going on that I figured out that I have to read that again this week, and I'm like, it's going to be a weird one.
Yeah, I'm just normal stuff, folks. Please follow on socials. Adam Reck on Blue Sky and Instagram, Arthur Stacy on Twitter, and we'll see you here next week for Rosenberg Uncanny. Should be interesting.
I'm excited. But until then, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!